Article 2, Section 11, Two-Way Contracts. Part A, Two-Way Player Salary. An NBA team may enter into a player contract that provides a player, or quote-unquote two-way player, with a tiered salary based on whether he is performing services on a particular day for an NBA G League team or the NBA team, or two-way contract. The salary is the sum of the two-way NBA salary and the two-way G League salary. Together, the two-way player salary. A player's two-way NBA salary equals the minimum annual salary for a player with 0 years of service, irrespective of how many years of service the player has accrued prior to the contract or accrues during the term of the contract, multiplied by a fraction. The numerator is the number of NBA days of service the player has accrued during the NBA regular season, and the denominator is the total number of days of that NBA regular season. The player's two-way G League salary equals the two-way annual G League salary multiplied by a fraction. The numerator is the number of G League days of service the player has accrued in the regular season, and the denominator is the total number of days of that G League regular season. Now, you'll find that tier of salaries, the scale of salaries on page 50. No two-way contract may include or provide for any bonuses, incentive compensation, deferred compensation, loans, or advances. Every two-way contract must contain an Exhibit 1B. It will say, this contract is intended to provide for a base compensation for the X amount of seasons equal to the two-way player's salary. Part B, days of service. Two-way players will accrue as follows: days of service. They will accrue 1 day of service as an NBA day of service for each calendar day during the NBA regular season during which the player is on the NBA's team active list for an NBA game, participates in any practices, drills, conditioning workouts with one or more players on the NBA team under the direction and supervision of the NBA team, travels with or at the direction of, including remaining on the road with, the NBA team, other than if the only travel during that day is return travel to the NBA's team home city that takes place between midnight and 1 a.m. The player will not accrue an NBA day of service for traveling between his G League team and NBA team. He will also not accrue an NBA day of service during NBA training camp or during the NBA playoffs. A two-way player will accrue 1 day of G League team a G League day of service for each calendar day during the G League regular season during which the two-way player is not providing an NBA day of service. He will not accrue a G League day of service during the G League training camp or during the G League playoffs. No player under a two-way contract may accrue more than 45 days of NBA days of service during an NBA regular season. This is called the 45-day two-way service limit. If a player is signed to a two-way contract after the start of the NBA regular season, the 45-day two-way service limit is prorated such that the max allowable number of NBA days of service that the player may accrue will be as follows: 45 multiplied by a fraction. The numerator is the number of days remaining in that NBA regular season as of the date such two-way contract is entered into, and the denominator is the total number of days of that NBA regular season, rounded up to the nearest whole number. If a player provides one or more NBA days of service before the first day of any G League training camp or after the final game of the player's G League regular season, such days will not count toward the 45-day two-way service limit. Part C, compensation protection. The max amount of base compensation protection for a season in a two-way contract is $50,000, provided that if the contract is signed after the first day of the NBA regular season, the max amount of base compensation will be $50,000 times a fraction. The numerator is the number of days remaining in the NBA regular season as of the date the contract is entered into, and the denominator is the total number of days of that NBA regular season. If a player's contract with a team contains base compensation protection that exceeds $50,000 and the team assigns or terminates the player's contract, then during the salary cap year in which the assignment or termination occurred, the player shall be precluded from playing under a G League contract for such team's G League affiliate and entering into a two-way contract with such team. Part D, contract term. The term of a two-way contract may not exceed 2 seasons in length and may not include any option year or early termination option. Part E, roster limitations. No team may have on its roster at any one time more than 2 two-way players. F, eligibility. No team may sign a player to a two-way contract after January 15 of any season. No team may sign or convert a player to a two-way contract if the player has or may have 4 seasons or more years of service at any point during the contract. For example, a player with 3 years of service would not be eligible to sign a two-way contract with the team for 2 years. No team may sign or convert a two-way contract or acquire a two-way contract by means of assignment if, as a result, the player would or could be under a two-way contract for any part of more than 3 salary cap years with the same NBA team. For example, a player who completes a 2-year two-way contract with the team could not subsequently sign a 2-year two-way contract with that team. Part G, standard NBA contract conversion option. Every two-way contract shall provide the team with an option to convert the two-way contract during its term to a standard NBA contract that provides for a salary for each salary cap year equal to the player's applicable minimum player salary and a term equal to the remainder of the original term of the two-way contract beginning on the date such option is exercised. That would be the standard NBA contract conversion option. Such player's minimum player salary is determined in accordance with Section 6. The standard NBA contract conversion option may be exercised at any point during the period beginning on July 1 and ending just prior to the start of the team's last regular season game. Every two-way contract with an Exhibit 1B must contain the following language. You can find that language on page 53. It's basically what was just said previously. Part H, exclusive rights. During the term of a two-way contract, the team that is the party to the two-way contract shall be the only team with which the two-way player may negotiate or sign a standard NBA contract. The team and the two-way player who are parties to such two-way contract shall have the right to negotiate and agree to a standard NBA contract. The prior two-way contract between the team and player will immediately be rendered null and void, and of no further force or effect shall it be converted to a standard NBA contract. Part I, Exhibit 10. Every contract with an Exhibit 10 shall provide the team with an option to convert the contract to a two-way contract that provides for the two-way player salary, or the two-way player conversion option. It must be exercised prior to the first day of the NBA regular season. It may not be exercised if it would result in a violation of Article 10, Section 4D. And if the team exercises the two-way player conversion option, the contract's Exhibit 1A will immediately become null and void. The player's compensation shall be equal to the two-way player's salary applicable for such season. The player's right to an Exhibit 10 bonus will be rescinded, and base compensation for lack of skill and injury or illness will be at an equal amount to the conversion protection amount. If a team exercises a two-way player conversion option, it needs not contain an Exhibit 1B. Every contract with an Exhibit 10 must contain the following language. And just like the other language, you can find that on page 55 below, and it pretty much just details what was just said. Section 12, bonuses. Part A. No uniform player contract may provide for a signing bonus that exceeds 15% of the compensation, including incentive compensation. No offer sheet may provide for a signing bonus that exceeds 10% of the compensation, including incentive compensation. If a player's contract provides for a signing bonus and the player is suspended for intentional failure or refusal to render services required under his contract, then it will result in being the bonus times the number of games suspended as a result of his refusal to render services over the number of regular season games left, excluding option years. That would be what the bonus would be reduced to. Part B. No uniform player contract may provide for the player's attendance at and participation in an off-season skill or conditioning program that exceeds 2 weeks. A uniform player contract that contains a bonus to be paid as a result of participation in an off-skill or off-season summer league or off-season skill or conditioning program will be paid if the team elects in writing to have the requirement as such, playing services, or the player decides in lieu of providing the services, participates in training camps or plays games with his national team during the off-season. The player has an injury, illness, or other medical condition that renders the player unable to perform services. So anytime the uniform player contract includes a bonus that will be paid as a result of any of those things, then those are the provisions that they can also add in there in order for the player to receive the bonus. A team should be required to provide the player with a reasonable opportunity to earn the bonus, for example, by providing the player with dates, times, and locations. No player contract may provide for bonuses for any season that will be paid as a result of the player's attendance and participation in the off-season activity or skill or conditioning that exceeds 20% of the player's base compensation for such season. Part D. If a player contract contains incentive compensation, a team and player shall not be permitted at any time to amend the contract to modify the conditions that the player must satisfy in order to earn any or all of such compensation, of such incentive compensation. Part 13, or Section 13, I should say. General. Upon the NBA's receipt of an executed uniform player contract, the NBA shall provide a copy of the same to the Players Association by email within 2 business days. Nothing herein is intended to affect the authority of the commissioner to approve or disapprove the player contracts, or the effect of the commissioner's approval or disapproval on the validity of such player contracts. A violation of the first sentence of subsection AI above may be considered evidence of a violation of Article 13. Part B. No player shall attend the regular training camp of any team or participate in games or organize practices until he is a party of a player contract that is in effect. The only form of compensation that a team may pay a player is cash via a check made payable to the player or direct deposit made to the player's bank account. Compensation of any other kind is prohibited. As Part D is actually detailing, no team shall make any direct deposit or indirect payment of any money, property, investments, loans, or anything else of value for fees or otherwise to an agent, attorney, or representative of the player. Nothing in this subsection shall prevent a team from sending a player's regular check to a player's agent, attorney, or representative if so instructed in writing by the player. So a check made out to the player could be sent to the agent's office, for example, but it could never be made out to the agent herself or himself. Part E. Every uniform player contract must provide that for each season of such contract, the player will be paid at least 20% of his salary in current base compensation in accordance with the payment schedule. This is excluding likely bonuses and any trade bonuses. Part F. No uniform player contract may provide for the payment of any compensation earned for a season prior to the July 1 immediately preceding the season. Going to skip Part G because that's pretty common knowledge. Part H. Every player with a uniform player contract must report for and submit to a physical examination by the team doctors via Exhibit 6. Now, this examination will be no later than the third business day following the execution of the contract. If the player does not pass the physical examination, the team shall notify the player no later than the sixth business day following the execution of the contract. The physical examination shall be a condition precedent to the validity of the contract. A required tender or qualifying offer may contain an Exhibit 6. If a player accepts then and does not pass, the required tender or qualified offer shall be deemed to have been withdrawn. Part I talks about a player that may know he has an injury, illness, or condition that may render him from being physically unable to play. He needs to come forward with that information. Section 14, void contracts. If a player contract fails to take effect or becomes void as a result of the commissioner's disapproval or the player's failure to pass a physical examination, then A, the team shall continue to possess the rights with respect to the player. B, any required tender or qualifying offer that was outstanding at the time the contract was executed shall continue in effect as if the contract had not been executed, but for no fewer than 6 business days following the commissioner's disapproval, the team's issuance of notice that the player did not pass the physical examination, or the rescission of such trade, as the case may be. And C, in the case of a player who does not pass a physical examination, the player should not be permitted to accept such required tender or qualifying offer for a period of 2 business days following his receipt of notice. The team may elect to withdraw the required tender or qualifying offer. And if the required tender or qualifying offer is not withdrawn by the team during this period, the required tender or qualifying offer shall thereafter be deemed amended so as to eliminate any Exhibit 6 that may be contained therein. Section 15, moratorium period. No player and team may enter into any oral or written agreement concerning terms or conditions of the player's employment during the moratorium period. The following shall be permitted during the moratorium period. A player may accept any required tender, qualifying offer, or maximum qualifying offer that is outstanding. A player and team may negotiate over the terms and conditions of a player contract that may be entered into following the conclusion of the moratorium period. A player and a team may enter into an offer sheet. A first-round pick and the team that holds his rights may enter into a rookie scale contract. A player and a team may enter into a player contract not to exceed 2 seasons in length that provides for a salary for each salary cap year equal to the two-way player salary or the minimum player salary applicable to that player, with no bonuses of any kind. A team may exercise a two-way contract standard NBA contract conversion option, or with respect to a contract with an Exhibit 10, such contract's two-way player conversion option. That concludes Article 2, Sections 11 through 15, pages 49 to 63, covering two-way contracts, bonuses, general, void contracts, and the moratorium period. Happy studying. See you at the top.